of us. I look out across the crowd and see a lot of Dave's friends out here and a lot of Ramona's family and friends. And this project is really, it's just an example of Ramona and Dave coming together and working to find a solution for the property. It wasn't producing as well as Ramona had liked for agricultural purposes, but yet she wanted to make sure the land was going to be dealt with the same respect that her family had over the years. And Dave convinced her that the Department of Fish and Wildlife would certainly be able to do that. My name is Chris Hildebrandt. I'm the regional biologist with Ducks Unlimited, and I was part of the conservation team of biologists and engineers that DU put together to restore this property. And I guess before I get into a brief little history, I want to just do some housekeeping stuff. So emergency exits are going to be to your right, to your left, behind you, and behind me in front of you here. If you hear the fire alarm sound, just run in all directions. What else? Earthquake. If we have an earthquake, just sit where you're at, and it'll be over soon.
And what about sinkholes?
Yeah, hopefully we won't have any sinkholes out here. Just a brief history of the project. Like I said, it really began with Ramona Ramacciotti and Dave Widell wanting to kind of find a conservation solution for the property, and they worked just hand in hand to make this happen. And the state agency that was most responsible for making this happen is the California Wildlife Conservation Board. They not only acquired the property on behalf of the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, but they also funded the restoration work out here. So very critical for the California Wildlife Conservation Board to be involved. Unfortunately, none of the staff members could make it down, but I wanted to make sure that everybody knew how critical they were in making this project happen. I also want to recognize the Department of Fish and Wildlife. As you guys know, the California budget situation has not been strong for several years now. And it really takes a lot of due diligence and, quite frankly, balls for the Department of Fish and Wildlife to take on new properties. It's really a lot of effort and resources, manpower, and cost to manage these properties. And the Department of Fish and Wildlife assured Ramona and Dave that this property was going to be maintained in perpetuity with the same respect that her family had. So I want to make sure to recognize Department of Fish and Wildlife. Also, I want to recognize Ramona Ramacciotti, the previous owner of this land. If she wasn't willing to separate herself from the property and have this property turn into the wetlands that it is now, although they're dry due to the drought we're in, that this project wouldn't have happened. And so with that, I'd like to invite Ramona to come up and say a few words about how she and Dave made this happen. Rick, did we get a backup on the mic? Okay. All right.
I thank everyone for coming. Today is a bittersweet day. I'm glad to see that my property's been restored to back to the wetland habitat. Unfortunately, it is without Dave. Yesterday was Dave's birthday.
Today?
Today?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. The 16th. In 2007, when Dave became general manager at Grasslands, I thought, here we go again. Back in the day, things were done with just a handshake. Water was beginning to be re-tiered and cut back, so farming this property would no longer be possible. I met with Dave and Pepper Schneider to discuss the future of my property with little water. Dave was very helpful and reassuring to me. He would say, just be patient. I would laugh at him, coming from one of the least patient people I knew. Dave had expressed to me how he would like for the property to be put back into the wetland habitat. The property had originally been wetland habitat until 1976, when it was converted into ag land by the Claus family. I had always knew the property as a Circle 4. When I was younger and my dad ran 1,000 head of cattle out in these grasslands, we would drive cattle from Camp 13 to our home place on Cotton Road. Then we would take the calves off the cows and drive the cattle to Circle 4, which was this. This was to be Circle 4 when I was younger. And to Circle 6 where Pepper Snyder has his big club, which is, I think, Sprig Heaven now. For me, it was just a part of my growing up. I hope as my grandkids grow older that they appreciate what a great area we live in. I know already my older grandkids have memories of Chief the hawk swooping down to get a carp out of the pond, or the little ground owls bobbing up and down when you get too close to their burrows. We have seen a bighorned owl amongst the dry tules, or a coyote winding his way on the cow path. I feel that by restoring this property, it has completed the South Grassland area, and Dave would be so proud to see this day. I'd like to thank John Donnelly, Chris Hildebrandt, Bill Cook, Mike Gardner, Rob Koch, Sean Carmo, Mark Freitas, Ducasse, Diane Fagundes, Jess and Veronica, Anton Giannoni, and Pepper Snyder, and most of all, my family for all their support. Thank you.
Now to give a Department of Fish and Wildlife perspective, I'd like to invite up Dr. Jeffrey Single, who is the Regional Manager for the Central Region, Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Thank you. Good morning. It's very, very nice to be here. Most of the time I get to go places and I'm in a little room with a whole bunch of lawyers who are on the other side of the table. I'm very thankful to be here. I am thankful for this family's wisdom and caring for the land for so many years and your decisions that you made. I'm thankful for Dave's incredible work and his impatient patience, as you put it, because we do sometimes move at glacial speed. I'm thankful for all the work that lots of people did to put this together. It's just wonderful to be here and to be able to celebrate the preservation and the preservation of something that we've lost so much of. And you know my department's mission: to conserve our fish and wildlife and natural resources for our use and enjoyment, their ecological values, and the way my boss puts it, our job is to keep it here and make it better for our children and their children. And that's what we're doing. And I thank everyone that was involved in this and everyone that's going to be involved in this. As Chris put it, we're kind of skittish about taking on more stuff to take care of, but this is definitely worth it, and we're going to take care of it and make it good. And we got the right people here to do that, and they're sitting in the audience. So you guys know your job, right? Anyway, I can't be as eloquent and gracious as the other speakers, but I was thinking about this on the drive over, and this is one small piece of a large legacy that's left to us by Dave. And, you know, to be able to leave behind some part of something that you love and have passion for, that will give to your family and to other people for years and for generations, that's an incredible legacy. And I would just wish for all of us here that in our lifetime we might be able to accomplish one small part of that sort of thing. So thank you all very much for having us here. I'm greatly appreciative.
Before I bring up the next speaker, I'll just give a little background on what the collages are out here. We have some photos from the construction work that was done out here. Most of the earth moving was done with heavy equipment, and we hired local contractors to do the work. What you're seeing on this particular collage is a lot of the kind of the flooded up wetland photos that were taken right after initial flood up. I also want to let you guys know, you may have already seen it on the riparian restoration collage. We actually had a volunteer crew, including some Department of Fish and Wildlife staff, that actually planted quail bush, coyote brush, mule fat, and willows along this stretch of the power poles here and adjacent to the swale that you see some water in there. So it was pretty neat. We had, I think, about 30 volunteers come out for that on one day and got it all planted up. Next, I'd like to invite up Rick Ortega, General Manager for the Grassland Water District.
Isn't this a beautiful day?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Good morning, and thanks so much in dedicating this beautiful marsh to both Ramona and Dave. Dave was a very close friend of mine, a mentor, a colleague, a brother. We got along good, and we worked really well together. For those of you who don't know me,
Speak up.
For those of you that don't know me, I'm Rick, and I've had a great pleasure in managing the grasslands for the past few years. I'm honored to have joined the ranks of legacy of conservationists, and am so fortunate to have such a dedicated crew. And if I could get a round of applause for my crew and my dedicated board of directors. I'd like to thank Ramona, WCB, DU, DFW for protecting this critical habitat in perpetuity. Landscape-wise, for those folks that don't know where we are, this is sort of the pinch point between the north and the south grasslands. And this is really a critical area because it provides for a more broad corridor more so than anything. We had initially thought that this place might be great as a staging reservoir, as a temporary holding facility to become more water efficient in our deliveries to the north especially. And we think that might have some future potential, but it's great to see it in seasonal wetlands currently, broadening this habitat, and we're very fortunate. Unfortunately, Dave's son, Ty Widell, was unable to make it today, but he did ask me to read a few things on his behalf. and he actually adds some humor to it, so it's great. It's a little known fact that both Widells had the privilege of driving a truck into one of the many canals around Los Banos. It is a cathartic experience, to say the least. Fortunately, word of that incident never got around to the old man's ears, so he never had the opportunity to ship me off to some distant oriental country to work the rice fields. Only seeming fittingly. I'm writing this as I head to Alaska for the second time to work on a commercial signer in the Prince William Sound. The hours oddly grow with the light. The sun sitting idly on the horizon reminds me of the priceless sunrises we experienced together during our hunts. As I continue to reflect on my time growing up in the grasslands, I realize how much my dad and I have in common, aside from our time spent in the ditches. I would like to think our dedication to the environment and sustainable efforts will reach the same level of passion someday, but it's hard to imagine I will ever surpass him in that regard. Looking over this northern wilderness reminds me of how much he revered wildlife, their habitats, especially in the Central Valley, and how he cherished that expanse of wetlands and all of the beauty, and made it his life goal to serve and protect them. But anyone who knew him understood that this method was to win at all costs, and in order to do that, and he did damn well at it. Over the course of his career, he was given many nicknames by his peers, which he proudly bragged to me about. The Cat in the Hat, the Ecuadorian drug kingpin, and Darth Vader. We're all fitting pseudonyms, and if anyone got in his way of trying to protect these wetlands, combinations of all three would mix and a raining hellfire would commence. I could see him doing a terrific impression of Bane, saying things like, "You merely adopted these wetlands. I was born here." Coupling his mouth and moving his devious-looking eyebrows up and down dramatically while he said it. However, as to all things, there are usually two sides to an extreme, and he was no exception. His fervor and roughness were many times countered with great sensitivity and kindness. He would tell me stories of protecting animals, shielding a killdeer nest from predators at coast cattle, and nursing an owl back to health in his backyard. He loved, lived, and breathed wildlife until the day he died. He was happiest in the blind amongst the waterfowl he loved, and what a big love it was. Ty would personally like to thank everyone who's helping to continue his passion. Everyone among GWD is like family to me, and And although I don't have the opportunity to visit as much as I'd like, there's a great comfort in knowing some of the most dedicated and talented people are continuing my father's efforts. His name among the wetlands is where it belongs, and for those who made it happen, I am incredibly grateful.
One more housekeeping thing. You might have heard a killdeer peeping around. About 1.5 feet west of that rock with the blue ribbon on it, there's a nest with 4 eggs in it. So we're helping protect that one as well. Next, I'd like to invite up Mark Biddlecombe, Director of Ducks Unlimited's Western Regional Office.
Thanks for all coming. As the director of the Western region, I am involved in a lot of projects, a lot of areas. Every one of them take partnerships. No one does anything by themselves anymore. Ducks Unlimited certainly doesn't, DFW doesn't. It all takes partnerships. I'm very grateful for the partnership here. Ramona, it's so wonderful that you were involved in this project. We can't do anything without private landowners. Department of Fish and Wildlife and Wildlife Conservation Board, we are involved in so many projects throughout the state with you all. I'm so grateful that you're there and we all have the same common mission. And the partnership that we had with Dave Widell was incredible. You know, Dave worked for Ducks Unlimited, he worked for the state, and he worked down at the Grasslands Water District. And Dave was a good friend, and he was the most passionate partner that we had in wetlands conservation. And I sit back and think about my times with Dave, and some of them were very, very entertaining, and some of them were very, very late at night, but they were always positive, you know, and I always considered I was so lucky that I was a friend of Dave Widell because I saw what he did to his enemies, and I never wanted to be that. But he was a very passionate person for waterfowl and for wetlands, and I'm very grateful for all the things that he's done, and it's so fitting that we're here today in his honor. I want to thank everyone for coming, and I want you to think about this. If you knew Dave Widell, think of his laugh. I can still picture it in my head, his laugh. He always made me laugh with him. There was no way you couldn't. So I just want to say thank you to everybody, and thank you to Dave.
Well, now I will open the floor to the mic that does not work. If there's anybody else that wants to come up and tell a Dave story or a wetlands conservation story or a good hunting story, come on up. All right, Gary.
My name's Gary Harris. I used to own the duck club over here, not too far from here, and I met Dave. I don't know, I was on the GRCD board. I don't even know when I met Dave, but you're right, his laugh is remembered. He got a little bigger as he came, you know, he ate too good down here, I think. But what a great guy. But the thing is, I really appreciate him for is, I always explain the grasslands is an hourglass. And this is the small part of the hourglass. If we'd have lost this, it'd have killed the guys in the south grasslands, and a lot of the guys in the north grassland would suffer too. And David Park, when I was here, somebody owned the property across the road where the Gadwall unit is now, and that was going to be the college and a bunch of houses. And across the road there was another project, 2,500 acres, going to be developed, and that would have killed us. And Dave had a part of all that, as I recall. I mean, the college is on the other side of town where it should be. This is preserved. Mr. Ramacciotti, this is great for you to do this for us. It made this stem a lot bigger, and it'll protect both south and north. The next problem you're going to have is they always wanted to pave Santa Fe Grade Road. Well, let's don't let that happen either. That would kill a lot of animals, and that little bird right there wouldn't have a place. So anyway, Dave was a great guy. I hate to lose him. Take care of yourselves, guys. We need everybody that's got a little conservation in our hearts, and we're getting old, and we're all dying, and our kids don't know this stuff, and so we're the ones that got to protect it. Dave, I always remember you guys.
Yeah, I was a good friend of Dave Widell's,
And once upon a time when Doug Federici and Pepper and myself, we were fighting for water, we got an invitation to go speak before Congress, and it was in front of Miller's Environmental and Water Committee. And Dave asked me if I would please attend because he thought that I could really go ahead. He said, "You're going to give a talk from the heart." And I said, "Okay, well, Jesus, that would be great." And I said, you know, I was kind of scared. I mean, you don't testify before Congress all the time. And I kept asking Dave, Dave, I said, I'll write the talk. And he said, "Oh, no," he says, "I'll write the talk." And so I kept asking him. I said, "Well, are you going to write the talk?" "Yeah, I'm going to write." "Well, give me a copy of it so I can see it. I think it should be kind of short, and I can go ahead and give it in just a little bit." And he said, well, he hadn't really gotten around to it, so I kept asking and asking and asking. Finally, day before we take off, he says, "Don't worry about it. I've got the talk all done." I said, "Well, fax me a copy." He didn't send me a copy. So I get together with Dave, and I says, "Where's the talk?" He says, "When we get on the plane, I'll show it to you." So he shows it to me. It's 6 typewritten pages, single space all the way down. And he said, "You're going to memorize this because it's going to come from your heart." And I said, "Dave, it's so long, I can't do that." He said, "Oh, no," he says, "you're going to memorize it." So we had a couple of days, and so I take a look at this, and on the plane, I'm going over it, and I'm trying to go ahead and memorize this 6-page long talk because we have 15 minutes to talk. And so anyway, along the way, we stop at an airport. It was in Chicago, and Dave says, "I have some friends. We have a layover that's 3 hours." He says, "Why don't you study the talk?" Well, I've been studying the talk as fast as I possibly can and trying to commit it to memory because I'm going to give it from the heart. And Dave says, "Well," and I said, "Dave," I said, "I'll sit right here, right next to where they get on the plane. And when you come back, I'm going to be studying this. You've got to tell me when you're getting on the plane." He says, "No problem, I wouldn't forget you." So I sit there, and the plane's getting ready to take off, and I'm asking everybody, "Did Dave Widell get on the plane?" Nobody knows anything. So the plane takes off, and so I finally find out that Dave Widell is on the plane. So he forgot me. He left me at the airport. I'm there by myself. So the first thing I can think of is I'll call Grasslands Water District. I call and I get Veronica on the phone, and she's laughing. She said, "How did you miss the plane?" But anyway, we get there in Washington, D.C., and Dave has everybody in the world to go talk to because he has these appointments set up. And meanwhile, I'm studying his speech. And my God, it's tough, you know. I mean, 6 pages long, and I'm supposed to commit this to memory, and I know that I can have a couple of notes. And so we sit there and we attend this Resources and Water Environmental Committee of George Miller's, and we sit there all day, and I'm going over this talk. Finally, Dave comes up to me and slaps me on the back and says, "I got something to tell you." I said, "What's that, Dave?" He says, "Well, it's a little bit of bad news." I said, "What's that?" He said, "These people have been sitting here all day listening to these Indians, listening to other congressmen and everything else, and they're tired." He says, "You have a minute and a half to give this talk." So basically, I got out that Grassland's a good place. It's the only wetlands in the San Joaquin Valley that's worth saving, and we need a water supply. But other than that, I didn't say much.
Would anybody else like to come up?
Well, I'm Doug Federici on the Grasslands Board, and since Jeff Carey mentioned my name as a friend of Dave Widell's, I met Dave through Jeff, and it was many years ago, and I don't remember the exact time, but he said, "I met this young guy, you ought to meet him," because Jeff and I worked together and always had a great interest in trying to promote the interests of the grasslands. This guy is very young, but he's really very smart and very aggressive. So anyway, I meet Dave, and he was, you know, I said, "Jeff, he's going to be a star. He's great." I said, "How old is he?" I figured he's 30 years old or something. He says, "He just graduated about a week ago from Davis. He's 21 years old." And I thought, "Oh man." And we chased Dave for years. He served the district at 2 different times in 2 different ways. as assistant manager and then later as our general manager. And Dave, as you all know, turned out to be every bit of the talent that I thought I recognized in him. He had this incredible drive and tenacity, but he was very smart, and as I think Rick mentioned, he could be a very personable person. And I know Ramona, working with him, he told me once, you're not gonna run over Ramona. If she doesn't like the program, it is not going to happen. So he was, and I think you had a wonderful friendship with Dave, which blossomed into what has occurred here. So, but one quick story about Dave's tenacity. I'd been on the board, Grasslands board, for a number of years, and I was on DU's board, and we were back at a meeting in Natchez, Mississippi, which is 3 hours ahead of us in time, and Dave had some emergency thing that had really upset him, and so he called at midnight, and he says, I got to talk to you about this, and I'm with my wife, and she's going, who the hell is that? And it's Dave Widell. And she says, well, does he know what time it is? And I said, Dave, do you know what time it is? He said, yeah, it's 9 o'clock. What time do you go to bed? And I said, it's midnight in Natchez, and we just drank dinner. I said, what? So anyway, he vents, and 3 o'clock in the morning, the phone rings again. It's Dave. This time my wife says, let me handle this. She goes over. She says, Dave, what time is it there? He says, I know it's a little late. It's midnight. She says, it is 3 o'clock here. Do not call back until the morning. Hangs up. 6 o'clock in the morning, which means it's 3 o'clock here in the morning. Widell. He has to go through this again. But anyway, that's the Dave that we all knew, and that's the Dave that we love. So.
Anybody else? Rusty?
Well, I just want to thank all you for recognizing Dave and Ramona. And I knew Dave obviously very well. His mother, Margaret, volunteered every day on my campaign for the assembly, and she came to me near the end of the campaign, and she said, I'm worried about my son. I really would like you to consider an internship for him. He was just finishing up at Davis. He was in the band, and he began kind of working for me as an intern, and then the rest is kind of history. I mean, he's a talented guy who loved politics, but he loved the grasslands the most. I think it's so fitting that you would name a wetland and dedicate it as a sanctuary, for him. I think just to complete the circle, we need to find a kitchen somewhere and name it for him, and we need to find a bar and name it for him. So maybe you could all think about that. I mean, I knew Dave very, very well and had a lot of great times with him, a lot of frustrations with him. Those are the things he loved the most. And Ty, of course, who he was very proud of, and Tracy, who he loved very much, and there were a lot of regrets that he always expressed about all of that. But Gary Harris talked about some of the threats to the grasslands out here. And when I think about this, when I was growing up out near Santanella, between Volta and Santanella out there, there were 2 people employed at Santanella. Now there's 1,500 and whatever is out there. And I look at a lot of things that Merced County didn't get right in terms of its planning and development. But one of the things it really got right was the preservation of this area. And you are all a part of that, and of course Dave is. And let me share with you a couple of stories. Right after I got elected to the assembly, a group of people came to me, and some of them had been some of my best financial supporters, and they're coming over, and they had a development plan for out here. And you grow up out, on the farm, and if the pH of the soil isn't neutral or nearly neutral, you don't think much of it. And anyway, they had plans for this area out here, and then Don Marchocki started hearing about it, and he quietly come over to me and and he'd say, you know, we just can't let that happen. You know, we can't let that happen. And so I was kind of in a political quandary, in that, you know, I had all these friends on both sides, but I knew in my heart of hearts that the thing to do was to protect the grasslands. So I remember calling Don one day, and I said, Don, I said, I'm going to give you this lawyer's name. His name was Tom Adams. I think Grassland still works with Adams and Broadwell. Maybe some of them are here. And I said, I want you to call him and talk to him about this. And I said, and I never want you to tell anybody that I gave you that. and I never want you to ask me for anything on this issue again. You know, this is my contribution to preserving the wetlands. And you know, they've had a glorious relationship. You know, one that you know, from a legal standpoint and a strategy standpoint has resulted in this. And every time I'd see Don Marchocki, he'd go like this. and Dave continued that, and of course, you know, worked with Don on all of those issues. But you know, I hired Dave when I was named by Governor Davis as director of state parks, and you know, having known Gray Davis in the state assembly, went in with him. He was the most experienced freshman, the president of our freshman class. There were 24 of us. I was probably the least experienced. But when he named me state parks director, he just gave me great autonomy to hire who I wanted. And there was this warring faction within state parks called the Off-Highway Vehicle Division. And you know, they're the folks that fix up these off sand wedges and Jeeps and whatever else. They go up on the Rubicon Trail. Maybe some of you were involved in that. And you know, they go out to San Luis Obispo County, to the dunes out there, and it's active recreation. But the environmentalists couldn't stand it because they wanted the vehicles off the beach, and they thought they were tearing up the countryside. And I called Dave in. I said, Dave, you know, I don't know who you're bullshitting, but you're the one person I know who can hang out with the environmental community and they respect you. And you can hang out with this other folks, a lot of rednecks, you know, and they respect you. So I said, I don't know how you do it, but I want you to take this program and get these people working together. And I mean, at the end of about 2 years, they were taking vacations together. They were going on cruises together. That program had been stymied for years, and they had the first expansion of the program because of Dave Widell's, you know, unique capabilities. He's the closest thing I had to a brother. When he moved in behind me out in Walnut Grove, he bought this big old wolf, you know, wolf stove, and he had it out there, and he was kind of proud of it, and he'd cook on it. And Tracy called me one day, and she said, you know, if you want that stove, you can take it, but you got to move it. It was kind of a two-edged deal, but it was. So I went in and I got a quote in terms of what it was worth and what it was going to cost to fix it. And what it was going to cost to fix it and restore it was about double what it was worth. Plus, I had to move it. But you know what? It sits back there, and it's kind of my connection with Dave. I can go back there and cook on it. It's not unlike for some of you, you know, coming out here. It's my connection to him because we always cooked together and shared things. And you know, we none of us are perfect. You know, Dave certainly had his flaws and his excesses. But what a talented guy, and what a difference he made. And the fact that all of you are coming out here and recognizing that into perpetuity is so special to me and my family, and I know his friends. So from the bottom of my heart, you know, thank all of you very, very, very much. Indulge me one more second. Speaking of development in the grasslands, this is a good one. I was gonna incorporate it into my comments. So, you know, I'm up there in Sacramento working. You know, it was right after I left state parks, and I'm working as a consultant. And one of the Greek developers up there, Angelos Kokopoulos, calls me one day and he said, hey, I need some help on some projects up here. So I'm helping Angelo, and Angelo had bought some land out in here with some of his partners, and he wanted to capitalize on, you know, the growth from San Jose and what was going on out here. And he wanted, you know, advantage his project as much as he could. So one day, he calls me and he says, hey, he goes, do you know who in the hell put that ban on putting that high-speed rail station in Las Banas? I said, I don't know anything about it. I don't know anything about it. He said, can you find out? So I start nosing around, and I find out that this amendment was added, that the grasslands, it was so close to pass that measure that they were trying to get everybody they could on board. And so the grasslands were opposed to the high-speed rail. The high-speed rail authority, when Quentin Kopp and some of those people were there, went to Dave Widell and he said, we'll support you if you put a ban on a station on the west side. So, in the old days, Dave would, he'd call me about that. He'd call my advice to get my advice. But he knew that I was doing some work for Angelo Sakopoulos, so I had to find out through all my contacts and everything else that he'd snuck around me and everybody else and put this ban in there, and you'd have to change the Constitution to get that changed. That was all Dave Widell. Thanks.
Excellent stories, and great example of Dave's ability to pull people together to reach a common goal. That was definitely one of his strengths. I want to touch on something I failed to do before, which was kind of describe our restoration out here. It's about 140 acres of wetlands, seasonal wetlands, and about 14 acres of uplands and some riparian habitat. And it's 2 wetland cells. It's split by this levee that you see running north and south right here. And then most of the upland habitat is going to be on the east side, as well as eventually, once it's all established and fully grown, it'll be kind of along this corridor here. And I wish we could take credit for planting the mustard, but that came in all on its own and it's doing quite nice. But we do have some quail bush coming up, coyote brush, and quite a bit of the willows. About 85% success so far are alive and well. So unless anybody else wants to come up and...
Will it be hunted?
It is currently being hunted, yes. Department of Fish and Wildlife has 3 blinds that actually the Wildlife Conservation Board helped fund and install. There's 3 blinds out here currently, and there is the potential in the plans for a handicap blind access out here for the future, but we're not sure about that yet. But it is hunted. Last fall was the first hunting season that it was hunted. It was hunted late last year. The flood up was started in November, and I believe at least for this year with the drought, it's probably going to be another late flood up for this particular parcel as well. So it'll be hunted probably December and January. Fritz?
Yeah, I'd just like to make one comment, and that is, it's really appropriate we're here today honoring Ramona and Dave, and it's really appropriate we're here in a dry season where there's no water out there, because we recognize that most of the wetlands in California are seasonal, and we have to make a promise here, and that promise is that we will return this winter. When we're canvasbacks out there, there are avocets out there, and we'll again recognize Ramona and Dave and what that's been. And I did want to say one thing about Dave. In full disclosure, I am a FOD, friend of Dave's, like most of you are. And I hunted with Dave. He was my hunting partner, and we hunted the Kerry Club. And I really didn't know what I was going to say about Dave until I saw Cherry, his dog, who's here, and Jeff Kerry. And when Jeff got up to speak, I said, I know what I'm going to say. And that is, Jeff has a rule in his club that the dogs have to be leashed in the blind. And it's a good rule, it's a safety rule, but we used to give Jeff a hard time about it. And Jeff is a great shot. He'd finish up early every hunt, and then he'd walk around and check the water levels. And Dave got in the habit where, as Jeff would be walking by in the levee, he'd shout, "No leashes, no leashes." And Jeff, of course, has hunted a lot, and he'd say, "What? No leashes!" And so it got to be a little game that Dave and Jeff would play. So just want to remember Dave, and great guy he was.
Sure, come on up.
Hi, I'm Tracy. I'm Ty's mom. I wanted to let everyone know, some people might be wondering, where is Dave right now? And actually he's here. I brought some ashes of Dave's today, and I'd really like to spread them. So if anyone wants to stick around for that, I think it would be fantastic for him to be here in perpetuity as well. And you know, Ty, it's really Ty's decision about where he wants his dad, and I'm so sad that he can't be here today. But when I called him and I said, you know, honey, you haven't really decided where we want to do this. Would you be okay if I brought it to the ceremony today? And he said, absolutely, Mom. So if anyone is interested in sticking around for that, Dave's going to be here in perpetuity too.
All right.
You pretty much can't follow that. I think that concludes the official celebration, and whoever wants to stick around, I'm definitely going to. We'll figure out where best to apply Dave on the resource. Thank you, everybody, for coming out.
Martini shaker. And he's in some shotgun shells, so.
Let's stand up for Ramona. Let's get Ramona out there too.
May there be a limit of greenheads on opening day.